To start, so as long as it works for the panel, I can get started.
Yeah, we're ready. Go ahead, I'm recording.
All right, welcome. All right, we'll get started. As more people come in, feel free to move forward so we can make this interactive and have a discussion about collective impact and action. So, as mentioned in the earlier session, you've been hearing quite a bit about collective impact, the importance of collective impact, all of us working together cross-sector, and also using technology to do good better, to make better decisions, to reach more people, to even understand the problems we're solving better. So what we wanted to do in this session is give you a couple of examples of collective impact in action, but also have a very open and transparent discussion about both the benefits and the challenges of collective impact, specifically in the humanitarian response. So we're talking about meeting the needs of conflict-affected children and youth. And then we'll talk about how can technology help us address the needs and what are some of the necessary conditions. I'll only take a couple of minutes to really set the stage for the projects and the programs and partnerships we'll be highlighting through the panel discussion, but the real stars of this discussion are actually sitting here representing 3 different projects that we'll talk about. How many of you are familiar with the No Lost Generation initiative? Few of you, including the project collaborators. So let me start by just giving you context for the No Lost Generation, because No Lost Generation itself is an example of collective impact. No Lost Generation initiative was started in 2013 by a few agencies, and right now it's at 30 plus UN and NGO agencies, to really coordinate the response in meeting the needs of conflict-affected children and youth affected by the conflict in Syria and Iraq. And it focuses on 6 countries, including Syria and Iraq, as well as countries like Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt. In 2017, No Lost Generation Initiative came to NetHope, and NetHope being known as both the collective of 57 global NGOs, but also as a cross-sector collaborator leveraging technology, and asked how might we activate the resources outside of the humanitarian sector, and specifically technology and the expertise outside of the humanitarian sectors, including the private sector and academic institutions. So in 2017, with the support from Microsoft and from TripAdvisor, we launched the Tech Task Force. The Tech Task Force is focused on bringing these experts from different sectors to collaborate on solving very specific problems, which we'll talk about in more detail, that conflict-affected children and youth face. And that's the age group 0 through 24 being the primary focus, but also recognizing that we're going to be serving up to 30. The task force is open to all of you. It's open to all humanitarian agencies, so UN agencies and global NGOs and local NGOs, as well as private sector companies, academic institutions, social entrepreneurs, and host governments. Just really recognizing, as we were discussing earlier this morning, that there's no single sector, no single institution that can solve all of these needs alone, and that we need a really diverse group at the table depending on what problems we're solving. You're seeing on this slide examples of some of the organizations that have been actively involved in the work, and there are over 70 different organizations that have joined since March of 2017. So there are 2 things that the task force does. We begin by creating a community that is comfortable and wants to share the existing programs, solutions, and resources. And we're doing this in a number of ways. Through the webinars, where we've featured specific partnerships and tech-enabled solutions that are addressing the needs ranging from education, both formal and informal, livelihoods, participation, and protection, which means really ensuring that children with disabilities and girls have access to some of those same resources. We're also openly talking about the work that we're doing, the projects which you'll be hearing about, and through the blogs and through the events. And the one thing for those of you, for both humanitarian sector and the private sector, we, at the outset of our engagement, we worked to publish a private sector engagement guide, really outlining a framework for how private sector can activate all of their resources and expertise including the traditional CSR. So we love cash grants and employee volunteering and product donations, but also other aspects and resources that are very important to solving the problem. So including business operations, so for example, hiring practices, hiring refugees, product development. We'll talk about new product development and product adaptation in this discussion. And third is advocacy. So that private sector engagement guide is available to all of you, and would love to also hear about some of the examples and what you are learning so we can iterate and evolve it together. The second part, and I would say even more important aspect of a collective impact, is to, through research, identify what problems need to be solved, and then to activate all the right resources and expertise in order to address those problems. So to really paint the picture of what those projects, like what the problems are, who the target audiences are, what the solutions are, and just keeping in mind that technology alone, you'll hear this from this group, is not the solution. It's actually everything we do together and why we need everybody at the table that represents the solution that is truly relevant but also sustainable. There are 4 projects that we're currently incubating. In fact, actually, we already launched one of them. We'll talk about that one. And then we'll focus on 3 in this discussion with 5 excellent speakers. And if any of you have any questions about the 4th one, the remote mentoring in English that we're incubating with UNICEF, Jordan, and Iraq, and Salesforce, I'm happy to talk to you about that after this session. So I'm going to actually let our experts explain, share with you what the projects are, and then we'll get into the discussion. I have a couple of prepared questions, mainly to help you dive deeper into the collective impact, technology, how does it work, what are the challenges and benefits. But we want to make this interactive, it's a small enough group. If you have any questions you want to ask before we even get to the Q&A, just raise your hand. So I'll invite our speakers to take their chairs. Alexander Shine is the Chief of Adolescent and Youth Development at UNICEF at Lebanon. Barbara Bergamini is the Education Specialist at the Norwegian Refugee Council, also coming to us from Lebanon. Lindsay Gnuven is the Head of Social Impact at Pluralsight and Pluralsight One. Ross Smith is the Director of Social Good at Microsoft and Skype. And Suhal Sooth is the Youth Civic Engagement Team Leader at Mercy Corps, coming to us from Jordan. So to get us started, I've asked each team, and we actually have 2 teams represented, and Suha and I can tag team on talking about the 3rd project, which is the Participation Challenge, to tell you more about what problem are they addressing, who is the audience, target audience that needs this problem to be addressed, and how are we doing that through the solution and through the partnership. So we'll start first with the Learn to Earn program with Alex and Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Leila, and thank you all for being here. As you all know, Lebanon is facing a huge humanitarian crisis, hosting upwards of 1.7 million refugees, of which 1 or 6 are youth. Of those youth, approximately, from when we look at the 15 to 18-year-olds, the majority are out of formal education. We're looking at unemployment rates of close to 60%. For the Lebanese side, which we also target through our programming, they're doing not as well. We're still looking at about 35% unemployment for Lebanese youth, due mostly to the poor education outcomes and a mismatch between the skills and competencies that they're graduating with and the labor market demands. So understanding that most of the youth that we're trying to serve are not going to go back into the formal education sector, really the core of the problem that we're trying to address is how can we deliver market relevant digital skills, social entrepreneurial skills, and basically including TBET skills that can increase their employability, and how do we engage importantly with the private sector and with government to support that linkage so that the skills that they are acquiring with income generating opportunities and employment opportunities. So this is a major challenge. One way that we've been addressing that is by establishing these innovation labs. We have 15 that are spread across Lebanon, really focusing on the more underserved and underprivileged communities, and trying to really provide that access to social entrepreneurship, linking them to the startup ecosystem, which is quite robust in Lebanon, and also with digital skills, and trying to see how we can build those skill sets and also facilitate the linkage to income generating opportunities, which we'll talk about in a little bit more in depth. And all of that is overlaid with mentorship, which is a really important component to really support the youth throughout this process. So it's through the digital skills training, that component, that we're working with Pluralsight and our partners DOT on the ground and in the innovation labs. And basically with DOT, we've created all kinds of different curricula which are really tailored to the needs of the youth and to the marketplace. But as we're implementing that, one of the main challenges is how can we keep up with the rapidly changing labor market? How can we bring it to scale? How can we include more youth? How can we export it to other countries? And this is where technology can play a really big role. And this is where our partnership with Pluralsight has really been key to help us think through how this platform can really be extended and really to support more youth and to make those linkages to the private sector. So you want to talk a little bit about what Pluralsight does and how it comes to our programs? That would be great.
Thank you. So Pluralsight is a technology learning platform. We really focus on intermediate to advanced technology skills. And I represent Pluralsight 1, which is our social enterprise. We are focused on the community-facing side of our mission to democratize technology skills. So through our partnership with UNICEF, it's been a really interesting exploration in how our existing platform, our existing feature set, which has an incredible capacity to scale and over 7,000 courses available online, can be applied to meet the needs that have really nuanced complexities in this different context. What we have been really focused on is, learning and applying our processes of human-centered design to understand the challenges that Alex and his team are endeavoring to overcome, and also to bring the expertise from our team and our product to really help shape an understanding of what the future of technology looks like, what the future of learning looks like, and how we might be able to collaborate to prevent further disruptions in learning, to address skills development in a way that is accessible and more inclusive, that also connects learning to earning, as Layla and Alex had mentioned, and also that really unlock opportunity. So for us, it's not skills development with a particular position outcome in mind. It's really about relevance, ensuring that there are pathways open to market opportunities, and that also youth have the skill sets needed to participate, to solve problems within their local communities, and to build, to be creators. So we're really working to see how we can organize our resources, our features, our content in a way that supports those needs, and that also prevents further vulnerability, where youth may be scaling up in areas that would not necessarily be relevant in the broader marketplace in the future, and helping to kind of collaborate on that conversation. So
yeah, so it's currently training, but we'll get into the discussion around the connections to earning.
Yes.
Yeah. And could you just mention the 3 training pathways that were based on the research that UNICEF did?
We have broadened these pathways already.
That we started with.
We started with a focus around digital, so design, and one of the reasons for that was a combination of interest and also opportunities to create. We've gone so far now that I'm actually
Android app development and IT management.
And IT, yeah. And so we had pathways that were directed towards those economic opportunities. We've really been expanding that and focusing on how we can organize content in a much more dynamic way, so that as those market needs shift, the NGO has the capacity to adjust content accordingly and create learning journeys, skill assessments, and outcomes that map to those variable needs.
That's great. So as we move to the participation challenge, one thing to note, all of these are incubations of the NLG Tech Task Force, and while they're being incubated by a specific group of partners with a lead humanitarian agency, they're being incubated for all 30 plus NLG agencies. So unlike the traditional approach in the sector where it is one-to-one partnership that hopefully makes it across the globe versus stays in one country, here we're actually talking about impacting all 162 million young people between the ages of 10 and 24 and addressing the needs that they have. So, and there will be connection points between the different projects. So we'll actually now go to Suha, who will represent the work the Mercy Corps has incubated with Adobe for NLG.
Yeah, so building on the number that you have just shared, Lindsay, we are living now in the most youthful population. And just like Ireland has the most youthful population, we also in Jordan has the most youthful population as well. And young people are facing lots of challenges. Participation is one of them. The sense of lacking a voice in their community is also one of the challenges, and what kind of opportunities are provided for young people to have their voices heard and to express themselves in creative way. So that's the problem, in addition to the limited access that they have when it comes to participation, and to connect with peers in safe environment, I would say, whether online or offline. Not to mention that there is also a lack of quality of training. And when we talk about quality of training in a digital literacy, we are talking about the most affected youth by crisis and conflict, and the language that is mostly spoken is Arabic language. And there is a huge need in this area for having quality of training resources that also speaks their language. That's for, I would say, the problem in general. And part of the solution was to provide these young people with the opportunity. And this was through a platform by Adobe, where we actually invited young people to express their ideas around identity. And it's not only about sharing the idea, we actually went to the community-based organization. Layla and Lindsay were part of that visit, and we engage young people in having these solutions. Maybe the challenge was in participation was the thing that we wanted to share, but when we went to the actual center and we listened to the needs of young people, we realized that they also need more training. They need more resources in order to know how they can work on this challenge. And that's how we collaborated with Pluralsight and IDRAC. IDRAC is also an online educational platform in Arabic, and Pluralsight is also an online educational platform where young people were able to learn more about this challenge and how can they express their identity, because usually they are identified by the borders where they're living at, but this challenge enabled them to think about identity in a different perspective and in a creative way. So having such a platform like Adobe, where young people can share their projects and share their voices, enabled them not only to connect with peers from the same community-based organization, but also it opened a new gate for them to interact with peers worldwide. Yes, it was supposed to be for young people aged between 13 to 24. That's the age for this challenge. But we do have young people not only in Jordan, but also in Syria, and Iraq, and also Turkey, who were able to participate in that challenge.
So from the Adobe perspective, Adobe actually had this existing platform that's called Adobe Project 1324, so ages 13 through 24, and has never really engaged the refugee population. So this was an opportunity for them to extend this platform with over 250,000 youth that are already from all over the world, young people, creative, emerging creatives that are participating in different creative challenges, whether it's through photography or through video and on different topics. So this was one of the gateways for one of the channels for the young people who feel isolated and not heard, to not only participate but also to design a challenge for all young people from all over the world to participate. So there were submissions from the US, from Colombia, from Germany, from other countries. So they became more visible to the population. And this platform is also open to all of you who might be working with the youth in other parts of the world.
And they also felt more appreciated because the platform enabled other people to share their opinions about their art pieces, and they had the sense of ownership to what they have created.
Great, thank you, Suha. And now we're going to hear more about the Hakim chatbot, which you heard a couple of times in the sessions this morning. So I'll hand it over to Barbara and Ross.
Yeah. So I want to build on, the problems and the youth profile that both Alex and Sua has mentioned, to dive more into, the specific challenges that female and male youth as in the region. So we are talking about 2 million refugees youth because of the Syrian crisis in the 5 host communities. Access to secondary education is less than 25% are enrolled in secondary education. The employment, Alex already mentioned, is very low, but yet youth, they are engaged in informal sector trying to provide an income for their families. So when you talk about male youth, they don't have a lot of free time, they have difficult freedom of movement to access also education opportunities because of legal barrier and legal residency issues. Instead, when you talk about female, it's more an issue of social norm that prevent them to move freely, and to, there are also negative coping mechanism in displacement, like early marriage, that really affect their further learning. On the other side, we also saw that, so youth, they need to access skills training, higher education or academic courses or job readiness courses to really improve their lifelong learning and their development, but they face all these barriers. On the other side, we realize that there are an abundance of courses provided by different service providers nowadays, academic institution, private sector, but for the youth it was difficult to navigate into the million of resources available and to understand which was most suitable to their needs. And this is why we came out with the Hakim solution.
Excellent. Yes. So what we've put together is a very unique partnership with NetHope and Norwegian Refugee Council, Microsoft, and the Lyra Research Institute, and students from the University College Dublin are up here. Thank you for coming. It's when we went into this, there's plenty of online courses, right? But it's very confusing. So you could start with a website and say, okay, here's computer science, and here's how to start a business, or how to create a good resume. But to the youth, it can be overwhelming. And so what we wanted to do was develop a chatbot with sort of a persona or personality of an older brother that you would go to for advice and say, okay, I'm interested in a career in technology. And the bot could engage you in a conversation that may lead you to a course in digital design or in programming or how to start a business. And so using artificial intelligence and a lot of the new technology to build it into an interactive Skype experience, we think will help to guide the students to a more productive, and a lot of the learn to earn, these kind of things, certification, to plug into these various efforts, but to give the students sort of a guidance counselor or an advisor to help get them started.
Great. So what we're going to do now is just shift to a couple of questions and leave also some time for the Q&A. I realize it's 1:33, so we're going to get through as many questions as possible, but if you already have questions, after I go through the first one, please raise your hand and we'll want to take your questions. And I'll merge the two questions sort of together. One is, why is your organization engaged in collective impact? For those of you who are currently not working collective impact environment, just understanding why even do this, because it's not like it seems like it's obvious thing, but it's also very hard. And what are some of the pros and cons? So I'll start with Alex, whichever part of the question you want to start with.
Well, I mean, working for the UN, working collectively and working through partnership is in our DNA. I mean, we're always working with, partnering with governments, with the NGO sector, with the private sector increasingly to see how we can leverage each other's resources to increase our impact. However, if we're really honest and look at a lot of these partnerships, they tend to be a little bit transactional in nature. And so what I've really appreciated about this opportunity and working with Pluralsight is really taking a step back and really having that collaborative problem solving, which is a step that is often just skipped over. I mean, we're always running to the solutions, and we really don't take the time to really understand what are the key challenges and issues that we're trying to address together. And I think, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I think one of the aspects that's facilitated that is the absence of funding. I mean, we've come together and we've agreed that we have an alignment of goals and have a vision to what we want to accomplish together. But that absence of funding has really given us the space to really be honest with each other, to really do that collective problem solving, and to really address when there's problems or when things are not working. And so we've been together iterating and piloting and really trying to learn as much as we can through that process in a very open and transparent way, which I think is at the heart of what we're trying to do here and really a true partnership.
What Alex is referring to when he says lack of funding, when we identified the problems, it was said who has the expertise, but also existing resources that they can bring to the table, which includes people and technologies and partnerships to build out these projects. So there was no separate pot of funding sitting anywhere for these projects to be built together, yet over a year, this group, these payers have been working together on the projects and with the facilitation from NetHope. Lindsay, why is Pluralsight involved?
So I've worked in the past in the humanitarian space, and for me, it's essential to find these types of relationships where you can build really candid feedback cycles. For a tech company to be engaged in philanthropy and to be giving, for us, the only real impact we can create is when those solutions are relevant and when they are informed by the needs and by those that we are wishing to support. Our mission, like Gary talked about earlier today, is really a moonshot in a lot of ways. We know that to democratize technology skills means overcoming barriers to access to educational opportunities that are massive in scope. And we can't achieve that alone through our company by just disseminating product. We need to do that with experts who are delivering that wraparound support with the youth that we're endeavoring to serve. And to have that openness and the frank conversations about the barriers, enables us to build and adapt a product in a way that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. It's enabled us to also build a product that's more inclusive on our enterprise side. So, for me, it's really the nature, collective impact is really the nature of social impact today. It's recognizing, removing the ego from giving and really recognizing the power of collaboration and of participation in building and co-creating those solutions, and then being willing to fail and constantly iterate so that you are meeting needs, you're not baking assumptions into the solutions you release and hoping for huge impact that really isn't there. So for us, it's a constant exercise. I think it's something that will continue, into the future, well beyond this explicit MVP. It's a way for us to create solutions that then can enable the scale to, dozens of humanitarian organizations and releasing a product that can impact millions of youth. So for us, it just is the spark that enables that impact and scale.
Thank you. Barbara, so I'll put you on the spot to also help us address this question of like, what are some of the pros and cons of collective impact?
Yeah, I think one of the pros is to, leverage the different parties' expertise and experience in order to develop or to adapt a product that is tailored to the needs of the final beneficiary of the end users, building on the technology experience of for example, the private sector. One of the cons can be that, as you said, there is not a specific fund allocation, so this is done on top of other duties that all of us we had together, so we couldn't dedicate enough time and resources. And but I think it's also it's a cons, but can be also an opportunity. We've been trying to really co-design with youth since the beginning, so it has taken maybe longer than what we expected, but we are really involving youth in its stage of the MVP, and in order to have a final product that will meet their needs at the end.
Yeah, and then Ross, how do you just given we heard from Justin and from Eric that Microsoft is involved in a number of humanitarian projects, but on this specific project, how do you just ensure that the project like Hakeem is addressing real problems and the local context rather than temporarily treating them?
So I think it's important to underscore what Barbara said is working directly with the conflict-affected youth and getting their feedback. Really, it in a sense it may take longer, but in a sense we're prioritizing the right way. So for example, we're sort of heavily focused on the artificial intelligence and machine learning and a lot of the cool tech stuff, and that doesn't matter if we don't have it in Arabic, right? And so for things like that, being able to hear directly from the youth, and things like as we look at course content, free, that's obviously important, but the importance of certification so that the youth can show that, hey, I have these skills. Not something that we would normally prioritize up front. And so I think that's been one of the big learnings for me in this project is the diverse set of perspectives and then the ability to connect directly with the youth in a different region, different time zone, all that, I think has really helped us set the right priorities.
Leila, can I add?
Yeah.
One of the things we've also seen is within our own community of Pluralsight learners, technologists, employees, authors, we have thousands and thousands of people who are part of that community. And for us to be able to share the knowledge and the insight that we're getting from Alex's team and also from the youth that they support, from Suha's team and the youth in her communities, it's been a really huge transfer of knowledge, which then enables us to build our entire course library in a more inclusive way. You then have people who are expert technologists who are leveraging that insight and really thinking differently about new contexts that wouldn't have applied to just a standard tech professional, and they're thinking about how they can teach their courses, how they can build solutions so that not only are they enabling that entire product and solution set to be more accessible, but they're also they're creating citizen philanthropists in the technologists that they're building on the enterprise, the commercial side. So I think the dual value is really powerful and has a much broader ripple effect for all of us.
I'll ask one more question and then ask you to raise your hands if you have any additional questions. But one of the things that we talk about is that there are all sorts of conditions that are necessary or factors that would allow technologists and also humanitarian experts to create more accessible, more responsive, more transformative technology-enabled solutions. So Suha, I'm curious to hear what you learned through the participation project.
The unique thing about that experience is that our young people work with our volunteers from the local community who were actually trained about the profound stress and attunement framework. So they do understand understand those young people, if they go under long time of stress, how they react and how long do they need in order to learn and apply what they gain utilizing technology. So yes, maybe it took them a bit of time in order to practice what they have learned, but also providing the open space for them in order to continue learning was something that is made them feel that they can do, even if they don't have the digital skills. There is the space, and there are the mentors who can support them in the learning process. And also, Leila, utilizing international days, such as the World Refugee Day, that actually it amplified the young people's voices. They knew that if they won in that challenge, their media creation will be displayed in a variety of locations. Not to mention that during the NLG task force, they were given the chance to stand on stage and share their stories. And that actually gave them a boost, and it gave them also a self-confidence, because they have never been given that chance before. Now, not only we are providing them with access to technology, but we also providing them with opportunities to have their voices heard.
So, Alex, I don't know if you want to add something around the enabling environment, and Barbara, maybe even around the process of how we actually built this together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, I mean, there's no such thing as plug and play. I mean, technology is fantastic, and what may work in North America or in Europe isn't necessarily going to be translatable or useful in the context that we're working with the population that we're trying to serve. So it's really, everything needs to be adapted to the local context. It needs to be in line with the needs and opportunities in that context. And so that's really the partnership that works for us. So, we really need that on the ground support. I mean, what we're finding is that simply having access to training courses isn't going to result in the learning outcomes or in the employment outcomes that we really want to see. The youth need much more support in terms of mentorship, in terms of those internships and on-the-job trainings to get their foot in the door, and all
Or even
of that.
connectivity.
Or connectivity, yeah. So all of that requires support on the ground. And we've had many examples in terms of language and connectivity. The Pluralsight took that learning, and to their credit, really worked really hard in coming up with some solutions that would work in the context.
So we've heard some of the infrastructure, so connectivity. Some of you here are working on connectivity. There's also offline availability, and there's language as some of the barriers that came up through iteration. And Barbara's just about the process. We've been doing this for a year. We've been using Lean Startup methodology. Just a couple of reflections, and then I would love to see a couple of hands in the meantime.
Yeah. So since the beginning, since the first MVP, we wanted to test it with a group of youth that have been always provided feedback. So the first feedback was also on the persona itself. So it was the youth themselves. They came out with the name Hakim, for example. That is a wise person in Arabic. They've been asked which were the categories of courses that they were more relevant for them, and which were the features that Hakim should have, and in which priority order. So, for example, as Ross mentioned, the Arabic functionality was a big issue. We wanted also to understand what was the situation in terms of connectivity and cost of internet. So we realized that, for example, while all the youth they have mobile phone, the cost of internet is very high. So this gave us also the idea of what is the sustainability later on, right? So the Hakim product will enable, humanitarian workers to really scale the intervention, because it can reach the 2 million of youth simultaneously. But I think there will be still the need of humanitarian actors to provide computer lab, or to be there to mentor and coach whenever needed.
Yeah. And what we've done also here is just capture some of the key things that we've learned along the way, the methodology we've used, but also things to just keep in mind. It seems so straightforward, but oftentimes we forget to even do the fundamentals. All right, question here first. I think you had a question.
Yes,
Go ahead.
thank you. So a comment and a question. I'm Daniel Rostrup with Avanti, and we can provide connectivity in the areas that you work. So the comment is more an offer to partner. Would love to work with you around connectivity. Secondly, the question, the solutions sound really, really interesting, and it sounds like the three components that strike me, that you've already had a social impact, which is phenomenal. You want to scale, but there's no money. So that in itself sounds very tricky. So how can we scale these initiatives and get around the issue of the lack of funding?
Do you want me to take it, or do you?
You brought up this, let's tag team on this. Go for it.
I mean, funding is always going to be an issue, but it's really trying to leverage the technology to be able to provide that level of access, which isn't currently there. So that's really what we're trying to do, because if we're looking at the traditional way of doing things, I mean, we have a great partner on the ground that's contextualizing and individualizing course curriculum, but we really can't, take that to scale. And so that's where, leveraging a foundation or a private company that is able to provide a platform that can be really taken across the countries that we're serving is really an opportunity to do that.
And
We
so
see
for
it
the,
as a fusion.
yeah,
Go ahead, Layla.
No, go ahead.
I would just say I see it as a fusion where, oftentimes we see this disconnect or a dead end for learning outcomes where there is a local solution, there's a CBO or an entity that is excellent at doing the beginner learning content around technology skills development, and there's not a resource available for continued learning. So you have a lot of excitement, you have dreams about what they can create and what they can build, an opportunity, and there are missing elements of that bridge that enable it. And so for us, it is not seeing Pluralsight as a silver bullet in the suite of needs that us and team are experiencing, but rather figuring out how we can help to bridge existing resources, the network of solutions that they already have in place, the excellence and the expertise that all of their partners and their and their team members have, and the interventions that are already underway in driving outcomes, and how can we be additive to that so that we can accelerate those outcomes, we can scale them, and we can fit these missing needs that have been identified.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I mean, the Hakim chatbot is something that can be plugged into the existing programming. So it's really looking for these components that truly scale and are relevant. I mean, one kind of huge benefit of Skype is actually available to anyone who has a phone. So you don't even need to go through NRC programming in the future, especially once NRC has moved on to the next big crisis, right?
Exactly.
For which they
Michael.
could use
And Michael is one of the core collaborators on the Hakim chatbot project.
So yes, I have a question for those of you who finished completed projects of sort of team partnership between the procurement sector and the industry. Could you talk about any recommendations for how to take it from the initial instantiation of sort of the first version of the project or the solution and transitioning it into something that is sustainable, scalable, where it goes into sort of maintenance? Ideally, that would mean more hands-off, at least from the initial contributors, or remove over to other people. But can somehow some recommendation guidelines for how to move from V1 out there to something that's scaled out?
Well, we're still in the
How would you
testing
use that?
phase. So we've done a first pilot, and there was a lot of learning from that. So now we've gone back to the drawing board, and we're about to start a second pilot with our partners on the ground. And from that, I think we will be able to draw some of the key lessons and some of the key principles and enabling factors so that other organizations that are trying to address similar problems can understand, is this appropriate solution to what we're trying to do or not? And it's really explicitly articulating those connection points and making sure that that enabling environment is there so that the platform can be scaled and used in multiple different areas.
And I would say part of our MVP is determining how we can enable local capacity to sustain that. So what kind of product-based toolkits or solutions could we create for easy onboarding, or to make that experience as seamless as possible as they scale to maybe lower tech sophisticated teams across the different countries in which they work. So it's identifying some of those opportunities and some of those lessons that they're having around organizational capacity and seeing if that's a solutions that we can also productize and solve through tech. And I'd also say, we, from a content perspective, are working towards that goal, understanding it's not just about beneficiary-facing outcomes, but it's really about what kind of capacity building resources do the professionals, the program staff need in order to be able to deliver this type of solution, especially when the technology is evolving so fast that they really need something that's dynamic and grounding, but also kind of like a curriculum backbone, that enables them to outsource some of that strategy to a partner. And so that's what we are taking on as a component part of our project is how can we leverage the resources we have to solve for that additional need that would contribute towards sustainability.
And NetHope will basically, that's what we do. We actually build the toolkits, go to markets, and then scale it up through all 57 global NGOs that are interested in leveraging these projects, or through NLG, that's another collective impact that's eagerly awaiting for these projects to reach product market fit. I don't know if you wanted to add anything on the scaling.
I think, we are in the process of discussing this together, and one of the points, for example, is exactly to learn from the process and the model and adapt it also for a future crisis where NRC will get engaged, for example. So this is a way of scaling a product that was developed also for a specific context to see how it can be adapted to other needs.
Yeah, great. I know we're over time. We can continue this discussion, and this team has offered to take the conversation, including some of the demos, like Hakeem demo, into the expo area. And everybody will be around today, tomorrow, and then also some of you in the AI for Good workshop. So this is just the beginning of a discussion. We're looking forward to learning from you. We've captured some of the insights here, and we might even collaborate on a blog post that actually consolidates some of these key learnings on collective impact in using technology. Thank you to a fantastic lineup of panelists and collaborators. It's been a pleasure working with you for the past year, and thank you all for joining us today.